Awesome. Hello, everyone. Good morning on this Tuesday, July 25th. Welcome to part 2 of Claudia Fernandez's workshop here for our 2023 PD Extravaganza on what do task-based lessons look like in the classroom. Part 1 of this workshop was already recorded. You can see it on our YouTube channel. It'll also be in the description below under this recording. But without further ado, I will let Claudia take it away for part 2. Thank you, Claudia.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's very nice with you. I see names that I recognize from yesterday. It was very nice activity that we have yesterday in the chat. I got the transcripts of the chat, and I read it several times, and I can see that you had very nice ideas, very good ideas. I love the way you interact with each other. And if there was something that I didn't answer, I'm sure there were many things or some things I didn't answer, please send me an email or ask today, the same question, and I will do my best to answer and to address all your questions, the questions that I have, that you have and that I can answer. Okay, so let's start with part 2 of this workshop. And as we were saying yesterday, I mentioned yesterday, the part 2 seeks to achieve, right, what is a pedagogic task, to have that idea clear, and how we can create a pedagogic task. So the action item for part 2 today, I asked you to think and be ready to respond what meaningful and purposeful activities would help my students accomplish a target task that we identified in part 1. For those of you who weren't here yesterday, what we talked about was to create a target task which serves as the goal of the pedagogic unit, right? So you have a goal, a pedagogic task that is meaningful, that it is purposeful, right? And that you want what you want is the students to accomplish this task, right? It's relatively complex, right? And students have to be prepared to do this final task. That is the goal of your pedagogic unit. And what we did yesterday was to think about several, or at least one target task that we can use, or that I can use in our classes, in our courses. The target tasks are usually things, not usually, they must be things that students are interested in, right? The students have something that is relevant, something that relates to the real world. The real world is the classroom as well, right? We are not avatars. The classroom is the real world. But what I'm saying with tasks that relate to the world outside of the classroom, things that humans do with the language, right? So what we did yesterday was to have a draft, at least have an idea of a target task, the goal, that leads the pedagogic unit. And I think many of you, if not all of you, had something in mind, right? This target task, and we share it. So today, what we're going to do, we're going to think about another task that is not a target task, but is called pedagogic task, because these tasks, what they do is to help the students achieve the target task, right? So today, hopefully, we can finish with you having one pedagogic unit, or at least a draft pedagogic unit, whose purpose is to help students to accomplish the target task that you identified yesterday. Okay, so let's review, again, what a pedagogic task is. It's a task, right? It's a task, but we call it pedagogic because is derived from the target task, right? It says, well, what is that I have a target task, and what is that my students need to learn in order to accomplish the target task. So it prepares students to carry out the target tasks and are deliberately designed to foster language learning, right? And among other things, but the pedagogic tasks are the vehicles that are going to have the language, that you want students to learn, right? That you at least have intention for the students to learn. We cannot ensure that they are going to learn this, because nothing ensures acquisition, right? But we can certainly facilitate, right, through the pedagogic task, the language that is required for the target task, right? And nothing else, right? Just the language that they are going, not all the language in the world, right? Just the things, the resources, the linguistic resources necessary that are going to help students to accomplish the target task, to carry out the target task. So when we think about today, you're gonna draft your pedagogic task, think about the following aspects. Think about the following. So let's see. First of all, right, what is the communicative purpose? Because the pedagogic task, they are as target tasks have a communicative purpose. What is that students are going to learn as a result of doing tasks that is not linguistic, right? What is that students are going to be able to do? What is that we are going to find out about ourselves, about the instructor, about the community, about the world? What is that? What is the outcome, right, of this pedagogic task? So, as I said yesterday, the communicative purpose is something, that's through. That is, that something that relates to interaction, to interpretation, to expression of meaning in a context with a purpose, right? That is a communicative activity, right? That is a communicative task. So what is the communicative purpose? I'm gonna give you an example so you have more or less a better idea. It's clear. So this is the first thing that you have to find out for the pedagogic task. What is that students are going to arrive at, right? Then in what ways will this task help students to complete the target task successfully, right? One pedagogic task is not going to help students to do the target task. You have to have several pedagogic, because the target task is pretty complex, right? So what you do is you unpack the target task and see, well, this activity is going to, or this task, pedagogic task is going to help students to accomplish this part of the target task. This other is going to help students to accomplish this, etc. So the pedagogic tasks are like stepping stones, right, in the completion of the target task. Today we're going to have only one, right, with the understanding that we will need most likely we're going to need more pedagogic tasks throughout the pedagogic unit, so students are better prepared, right? But in what ways these particular pedagogic tasks are going to help students to accomplish the target task successfully? Then let's think about what will students have to do that has the potential to help them learn the linguistic knowledge necessary for the target task, right? So in that way, what is that students, in what ways are we going to facilitate the acquisition of the new language that is required for the target task? I think many of you are going to say, well, it has to be lots of input, right? Readings, listening, things that are going, like maybe having the certain keywords enhanced so students pay attention to it, and they are incorporating this new language, as they are doing the pedagogic task, right? So think about that, in what ways this pedagogic task is going to help students. And I'm going to show you, as I said, in an example later. Okay, so this is one of the purposes. Another thing is, think about the modes of communication that the pedagogic tasks involve. It could be just interpretation, fantastic, with a communicative outcome, of course, right? Interaction with a communicative outcome, right? Expression, or the three of them, right? Or two of them, or it could be, but it is always good to have what is the mode of communication that students are going to be engaged in, so you are better prepared to manage the class and everything, right? Okay. Another one is, are there enough steps in the procedure and the procedure is clear, right, to be carried out successfully? So you don't want to rush a pedagogic task, because pedagogic tasks are essential aspects of the pedagogic unit, right? You want to take your time. You want to have several steps very well detailed and specified so students can follow, right? Take your time. In my program, for example, in my class, I only have usually one pedagogic task per class time for 50 minutes. In 50 minutes, I sometimes have only one, sometimes two pedagogic tasks. I do it very carefully. I implement it in a very careful way, guiding the students, take my time and really exploit, each of the steps of the pedagogic task, right? So the procedure has to be clear, and the objective, the goal has to be clear for you and for the students. Okay, so as I'm thinking, as I'm talking, you think, let me see what I can do with this pedagogic task that I thought about it yesterday while I was brushing my teeth, right? So think about it. How this pedagogic task is going to accomplish at least these 5 points here. So let me give you an example, the one that I showed you yesterday very quickly. So a pedagogic task-based lesson consists of steps and is goal-oriented, right? We already know, and I guess that you all know, because you make lots of lesson plans, right? And you have a goal and you have steps, and how much time and how am I going to do this? So you already know, I'm sure, unless you are new, right? Even if you are new, well, take, this as a first step as you start, planning your lesson. But it has to have steps and it has to have a goal. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example. And let's analyze this example. In what ways this is going to help my target task. So Alejandro has a question: how do you enforce the target language when the students are working with on their pedagogical task? I'm going to show you, Alejandro, in a minute. Okay, so this is the example that I showed you yesterday of one of my pedagogic tasks, whose purpose is to help the students accomplish the target task. Do you remember what was the target task, my target task? Remember? Put it in the chat. What was my target task? What is that my students have to do I mean, we did it last semester at the end of the pedagogic unit, remember? Someone write this in the chat. What is my goal? What was the goal? Anyone? Remember that I said, well, students have to, yeah, Erin, excellent. Okay. No, Jason, to teach someone a recipe, maybe it was yours, but it is not mine. Erin, yes, exactly. The one that I showed you yesterday, right, with the material. Remember the material, that I showed you. So the task was to design an object. Very well, Erin. Design an object, right, that solves an everyday problem, and we had the problems of 3 people, and the students get to choose one, right? And with the purpose of presenting it to the class, so the task is going to evaluate your object, and the class is going to select the best object of all of them, right? Or the best object of the class. So students had to read, the problems of these 3 people, select one that they want to resolve, design the object with their hand, right? With paper and pencil, that can solve, right, this problem, and then these students have to present the object, and they have to describe the object to the class, what it is for, what is it called, why is serving this purpose, what does it do, what is the material, anything that we do as speakers of Spanish, in this case Spanish, or as native speakers do, when they have to describe an object with the purpose of enhancing their qualities, so it wins, right? So the class is going to pick, a winner, the best object of them all, right? So very well, Eric. Fantastic. Okay, so keeping in mind this goal that I had, right? This goal, and I only had 5 days, remember, to do this, to prepare my students. This is one of the pedagogic tasks that I had, whose purpose was to help students, a stepping stone in their carry out of the target task. Okay, so let's analyze it a little bit, so we learn and we can do something similar, right? Based on the same principles, at least. So first of all, you have this pedagogic task and has 4 steps, right? So it is structured, right? It's not just one thing, it is structured. Then, first of all, it has the communicative objective, right? To identify a kitchen gadget that it is the least useful. I think that, the designers of this material say, well, what is the least? I guess it was the least useful because usually gadgets, we buy them, because we fall in love with them like impulse buying. And then we find out that it was just worthless and useless, right? So anyway, so this is the objective. to identify a kitchen gadget that is the least useful. As you can see, my objective is not to practice the subjunctive or to learn vocabulary or to know. It is a really communicative object. We are going to have an outcome that is not linguistic, and we're going to, find out about gadgets in the kitchen. Okay, so what they have to do is, the first thing, is to students read tweets. Well, this is not a tweet necessarily, but let's say read ads, describing interesting kitchen gadgets, to select the ones that they would buy and the one that they would never buy, right? So this is part of the advertisements, of the tweets, this here, with an image, and a description. And we have several of them. This is just an example, right? Several of them. And I ask students to read them, not just to read, right? No, read them with a purpose. Read them because you need to tell me which ones you would buy and which one you would never buy and why, right? So as my friend Florencia Henshaw says, input has been compelling. You cannot say just exposure to input. Students have to do something with the input, right? Okay, and this input, right, it is very clever because this input contains, it looks authentic, it's gotta be authentic as much as possible without being incomprehensible, right? But it has, the expressions and the words that students, are going to, hopefully, are going to find useful, resourceful when they have to describe their object. So, for example, in this particular case, it says reusable elastic bowl, dish, and plate covers. Easy to use and easy to clean. They come in 3 different sizes. See-through poly lets you see contents without removing. Makes after dinner cleanup a snap, right? That's very nice. So this is going to say something. As you can see, these are very carefully selected. I selected from Amazon, actually. This is an ad from Amazon, and the imaging was from Amazon too, right? So I took it from them, and I saw that it says reusable. Reusable is a very good word to learn when you are describing an object, right? Because it's a positive characteristic, right? Then easy to use. Wow, it is a very important phrase too. Right? Easy to use, easy to clean, right? Easy to use could be very well used, for one of the people's problems from the target task that's, had this problem with the alarm, the clock alarm, in the morning, she couldn't wake up, remember? So easy to use is very good, They come in 3 different sizes. They come in 3 different sizes is an expression also that could be used, for example, for the uniforms, right? Americans say they come in 3 different sizes. Well, so this is something that we can see. Also, I choose to put here see-through poly, right? Because it's something that it is used in real work, right? I sometimes, as we can see, textbook writers try to clean things to make it more comprehensible, but they sacrifice authenticity, right? So I could easily say, oh, they will never understand see-through poly, so I'm gonna put plastic, transparent plastic. Well, no, nobody says that. They say see-through poly, right? So let's put it there because it's exactly the words that students need to learn, when they are in the real world, right? Nobody says for this particular context, transparent plastic. Right? So see-through poly lets you see contents without removing. Makes after dinner cleanup a snap. That's an expression, right, that maybe my students might find interesting to learn for the purpose of the target task. So while we are doing that, Alejandro, you were having this question, my students are reading this, right? And and they have to decide if they would buy it or not. In order to decide that, they need to understand most of the text. So they are gonna raise their hand and they say, Professor, what does poly, see-through poly mean? And then I'm going to explain. Oh, okay. So this is a moment of learning, right? This is a moment, and the chances that they are going to learn this are higher than if it was just a vocabulary list, because they need this information right now to do this task, right? To decide if they are going to buy it or not. So the need makes the language much more memorable and increases the chances to learn, right? So this is exactly, some things, are clear, some things are not clear, and this is let's put the like excuse, if you want to say, for students to start learning, right? To start learning these phrases that are going to be, useful for when they have to do the target task. Okay, so after they have done that, we go to number 2, and I ask, maybe we can just, talk about it, discuss about it, which ones would you buy, why, and maybe we can have a discussion or maybe a conclusion of what among all these, gadgets, which is the most useless, or and we can, expand on this number 1. I do that all the time. I really exploit each step. Then in number 2, I say, now, do you have by any chance a gadget that you never or almost never use? What is it like? Why do you never use it? So you make it personal to the students. Now let's talk about your gadgets, right? And I say, think about it, right? Think individually. Think about it, and you can write it down if you want to, or just make notes, and I give you a model. For example, I have a blender that makes very good smoothies, but it takes up too much space. That's another thing in the input. To take much space, is a quality of the object, or to take less space, right? No ocupa espacio, as we say in Spanish. It is difficult to clean. Again, difficult to clean, easy to clean, remember, right? So I'm repeating. And I never use it because it can only make smoothies. It cannot make soups or anything else. So, it's not very useful. Okay, so I give students, 3, 4, whatever minutes you think, it would be enough, for them to think. And then number 3, now I put them in groups, 3 or 4 people, right? Chat with your classmates in a group about your gadgets. Just to chat? No, you have to chat because you have to select the least useful of them all. So I'm gonna make each of you accountable in number 2 and in number 3. It's not just chatting practice for the sake of practice. You have to find in your group which is the least, so you have to pay attention to what your classmates are saying, right? And if you don't understand, you have to say, please repeat, I can understand, what is that? They raise your hand, they raise their hand to ask me questions sometimes, so I'm monitoring this group work, right? And then, after they have done and they have selected, I usually stop and say, now, if you have all these codes, right? Now I'm gonna give you 1 minute to decide which is the least useful of them all in your group. So how do you decide it? So they have to come up with one, right? And then one person in the group will share it with the rest of the class. What is this gadget? Describe it, and why, is not very useful, right? So usually you can put it, you can do it orally. This time what I did was I gave everyone a marker, and they wrote it in the, on the blackboard, and the person that was selected in the group described the object. And the outcome was to have a list of gadgets that maybe we have never heard about, and this list they are not very useful. And it went a little bit towards maybe more serious conversations regarding, plastic waste, and things that we buy, impulse buying, why do you buy that? Marketing, you can go, the sky is the limit, right? But there was an outcome. So this is, what a pedagogic task looks like. And as you can see, it took me like 50 minutes, my class 45 minutes, 40 minutes, I don't know, depending on how big is your class. My class had about 18 or 16 students last semester, so it took most of the time, right? And the students were very engaged. One of the things that happened that I have to share with you with this pedagogic task is that, well, I didn't prepare. I prepared very well, but I didn't foresee something that happened, is that the students were giving me names of gadgets in English that I didn't know. That I didn't know what I didn't know, what I had never seen them, but also I didn't know the name in Spanish. So they were saying, what does it is called in Spanish? And I didn't know. So that was a little bit, it worked out at the end because they had to describe to me, what is it, because I didn't know what was that, in Spanish. But I have to say that it was like an obstacle in the flow of the activity, right? So that happens. I'm just giving you, my experience, which it was okay, But as you can see, the target, the pedagogic task is the vehicle of the language, right? that is, in my opinion, what is a pedagogic task. Is the language is really a tool, right? So we can do something with it. Okay, perfect. All right. So let's see what is in the chat before we go. You know, I'm gonna give you some minutes or some seconds to think about the pedagogic task, right? So let's see. It says, yeah, gracias for the interaction. Okay, might be in Spanish. Okay. But interaction with you might be in Spanish, but when they get together, they switch to English. Well, this was Spanish 104, Alejandro. So my students do not switch to English very well. You know why? They don't switch to English because they had it written, right? And because every time that every day that we have this type of group work, I have given them already all the time, how do you call that, conversation gambits, right? So, hola, ¿qué tal? How are you? For me, you know, para mí, or for me, and what do you have? You know, I teach them all these expressions on a regular basis. Some teachers have them even, you know, I don't have it because I don't have a classroom of my own, you know, but some teachers have these conversation gambits already as a poster, you know, so students can use them whenever. And it is a matter of training them, you know. It sounds a little bit bad and they are not dogs or, you know, cats, but it is a matter of training. So the students do not switch to English because you already have number 2 here, you know, so at least you prevent a little bit that, right? Okay, all right, so let's see. I will continue with the chat, but I just want to get you to do your pedagogic task. So I'm gonna give you a few minutes for you to start drafting. You don't have to do the complete thing, you know, but just drafting your pedagogic task. And I'm gonna give you some tips. So start planning with the end in mind. Remember, you know, as Jason put in the chat yesterday, the backwards design, right? So what is the outcome of the task? What is that you want to accomplish as a result of the task, right? And it's not linguistic. Don't say sorry to repeat that, but if you say to learn the future, that is not a communicative outcome. You cannot say that, you know. So say something else, you know, what is at the end, why the future, what to do what, right? Okay. So how much time would you give the students for each step? When and how would you contextualize the task to make it relevant? That is very important. We were talking about gadgets, but it was not relevant until I asked you about your gadgets, right? About what is that you have that is completely useless in your kitchen? Do you have something, or your mother, right? Maybe if it is in primary school or secondary school, maybe students do not cook much, but they can go and ask their mother, you know, mother, you have a gadget that is very useless, you know, and they can bring it to class, for example, right? But make it relevant to their lives. When would the students work alone, and when in pairs and groups, and why? Ask always this. Why has always given me very good, it's very helpful for me. I have observed a lot of, you know, classes in Spanish language classes with novice teachers, and they put them in pairs for work that it could be easily done individually, right? So why in pairs if they have to read? You read usually individually, right? So think, why in pairs? In what ways the pair work is going to help, you know, the student accomplish the task? What happens of the task material, or what aspects of the task material would be challenging, right? Or how are you going to address it? Is it too difficult, you know, the text? How can I make it less difficult? Without losing authenticity, of course, right? Or maybe challenging for you, like as a teacher, like what happened to me, that the names of the gadgets, because, you know, English is my second language, for me were, you know, I didn't know how to even say it in Spanish. So think about that in a proactive way. What would you do to make students accountable? This is so important for engagement, right? You make to make each and every one student accountable. Someone has to play a role in the whole thing, you know? If you see here, right? I said, well, you are prepared. Yeah, prepare yourself here, number 2, because in number 3, you're gonna be saying something, you know? And then you group are going to pay attention to your classmates, because you have to select that is useful. So in 2 and 3 is deliberately, I am making the effort of making everyone accountable. So it increases engagement, right? Fantastic. Okay. So Before I give you, I'm going to give you a motivating citation, motivating phrase that I think it encompasses what a pedagogic task is, and it's going to maybe helpful for your class, for your task. So Van den Branden, which is, a scholar in TVLT, very known, I love him. He says, I would suggest that what crucially matters is that a pedagogic task is conceived as motivating, challenging, and holistic activity, which activates students into meaningful language use in order to achieve a clear outcome. I think it's very beautiful. Exactly. I would say challenging enough, right? It cannot be too challenging because otherwise, you kill totally the motivation. But it should be something that the students are interested in, that is challenging, etc. Okay. All right. So, is there something? So I'm going to give you some time, to select. Maybe I would say, what about like 5 minutes or so? So see, I think everybody's here, right? Thank you, Alejandro, for your chat, and we're going to continue. And I would like to ask if a volunteer, if someone would like to share the pedagogic task or whatever it is that you have in mind with all of us. Do you want to maybe volunteer someone, say, oh, Martha or Kimiko had a very good task, and I say Kimiko should do it. So let's have like 3 at least people so we can learn from each other. Who wants to start?
I'm ready.
Okay.
My name is Mark, and my complication teaching Spanish 1 and even into Spanish 2 is my students don't know when holidays occur. They love holidays, they love the thought of them, but they have no idea. So I bring that into the study of the calendar, the months of the year, the seasons, and all of that. And so my idea for a target task is for them to tell me about their favorite holiday, when it happens, some background information, maybe how they celebrate it, and then try to find out how in another part of the world it's celebrated in a slightly different way. So that way we're covering 2 bases. They do have to do a little bit of research and find out something new, but they're also telling something personal from their own standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and that is a target task, right? Like to make a comparison between one holiday and other holidays is what you say. What you're saying? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. So they need to learn about the holidays that they in the US that they don't know about, right? And they need to learn about holidays in other parts of the world, right?
Not necessarily a holiday from another part of the world, just how that holiday might be celebrated differently.
Okay.
For example, Christmas. Here in America, we're all about Christmas Eve, but in Mexico, it's more about La Posada.
I understand.
So that could be one way.
Okay, so it's like, well, the students are going to compare, the way we celebrate the equivalent holidays, right? Perfect. So that is a target task. Okay, so what is that your students need to know in order to give a presentation comparing 2 ways of celebrating the same holiday? Right, you have to answer it right now. But yes, think about it. So they have to come to the class. I think it's a presentation, I guess, or whatever it is that you have to go in front of the class and say, well, this is a presentation about Christmas celebrated in Costa Rica and Christmas in the US, or in my family's culture, if you want to say it, because everyone is different. And yes. Here it is, right? So what is that the students need to learn, right, in content and in linguistic resources for them to be able to do that in Spanish. Mm-hmm. So that is going to be your pedagogic tasks, right? Well, first, maybe they should read about holidays in the US, right? Christmas in the US, or maybe we should have a task in which they think about how they celebrate their own Christmas, or maybe nobody celebrates Christmas because it's from another religion, right? And maybe learn about Christmas in the US, and then another pedagogic task is to learn different celebrations of the same holiday, right? And we are going, I have one, you have one, and we are in pairs compare it, or share, this. I learn from you, you learn from me, and we decide what is the comparisons and the differences, and share it with the classroom. Or maybe another one is the linguistic resources that we are not, you know what I mean? So think about your target task is fantastic, but I tell everybody, right? One of the keys for the pedagogic task is to know the target task very well. So you can see, well, they need this, they need this, they need this, they need this. And in that way, you know, everything is relevant, right? Pedagogic tasks is relevant. What do you think, Mark?
Yes, I agree. And as I said, another thing about my school is we have a lot of students who are first generation from other parts of the world. So I'm happy to let them tell me about something that's important in their, I hate to say home country, native country, whatever. I want to be respectful about how I say that, but share that, because we do have cultural events at our school that help them highlight their own cultures, because we have 48 amongst our students, 48 different languages are spoken.
Fantastic,
So
yes.
it's very international in that respect, but
Well,
so many of them have been here all of their lives, so that it's English communication skills are great.
Fantastic. So you have to exploit that in your class, right? Exploit that, because it's a rich source of conversation, of using the language to share things about ourselves that we don't know about. Fantastic. Very nice, Mark. Let me ask someone else. Is there another volunteer?
I'll volunteer.
Erin, go ahead.
Okay, so I picked my target task from the list you gave yesterday, which is the target task is write a biography about your classmate.
Oh, that's a nice one. Yes.
Because I thought it would be a good way for my French 3 students to review the past tense, which they learned in French 2, and they aren't going to remember after the summer. So I'm going to give them, to start off with, I'm going to give them 3 or 4 short biographies of well-known French speakers.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to have a list of things that are normally in a biography, like birth date, birthplace, where they went to school, what they did as a kid, and they have to indicate which biographies show that information.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then after they do that, they have to do a quick bullet list of their own biography, like when they were born, where they were born, where they went to school, what they like to do as a kid, just kind of like in bullet format.
Mm-hmm.
And this is very complex. And then they're going to basically compare what they would put, or what their childhood was like, to the childhood of the 3 or 4 other people, maybe using Venn diagrams.
Okay.
And then they tell the class which of the 3 or 4 people they're most like, and maybe who they're least like. And then as a class, we decide who as a class are we most like and who are we least like.
Okay. That is a communicative outcome, right? Among these 3 French people, right? Which is the one that we like the most? So that's very good. I think this fantastic, right? It is a very nice task, that one. The only thing that I would say is that make it relevant for when they write their own biography. You know, it could be another thing we can adapt it into. In what ways, as you say, we are different and we are the same, right? Among these French people, and maybe we can say people from a different era, right? And say, well, you know, even though this person, you know, was born in the 1700s, that it had, you know, it used to do something in their childhood that we do as well, right? Yeah. So compare something, you know, so in that ways, students compare the life of someone, you know, that it is in another country or in another era or whatever, with their lives, and find characteristics that are the same. And then you can say, interesting that childhoods are, in what ways childhoods are the same, in what childhoods are different, right? You make it a little more complex if you want to, a little bit more complex in discussion. Fantastic. And in that is going to carry the language that they are going to use in their biography. So it is very important, and I want to say that if you are asking students to write a biography, they need to read a biography, right? They need to see what a biography is. If you want to ask students to write a recipe, they need to know what a recipe is, right? I mean, that is almost logical, right? So it is a very nice way to start. Think about it and polish it, Erin, because I think you have a good one thing, as well as Mark. Okay, fantastic. So what about someone else? Let's see, one more. We're about to finish, so one more.
I can share.
Okay. Let's see who is this person. Who is this person?
Shannon.
Shannon. Hey, Shannon, how are you?
Good, thanks.
I like your
So-
target task. So that you put in the chat. I love it. I read it. So tell us about your target task, and then what are you gonna do to help students to accomplish it?
So the target task my university has a podcast about environmental issues. And the task is that the students have to write a proposal letter to this podcast, encouraging them to interview an environmental initiative from the Spanish-speaking world.
Okay. So it's a proposal letter.
Mm-hmm.
All
Yes.
right. Okay.
And then, so today I'm thinking about the pedagogical tasks. I think that our textbook has some support for this, but it could be developed further. And I was thinking one of the pedagogical tasks could be to show the students the Sustainable Development Goals from the United Nations, which comes in many languages. It's available in Spanish already. So that would give them some of that basic language to talk about different areas, whether it's clean water or sustainable agriculture, and some of that vocabulary that's going to come up that they're going to need when they do their research and select their initiative. And I would have them just first read them all and then pick 3 that are most interesting or important to them personally, and then share that with their partner and why. And then I would have to create maybe 3 to 5 profiles of initiatives that do different things, from advocacy to agriculture to reusable plastics, things like that. And then they would have to match those to 1 or more sustainable development goals that they could collaborate with.
Okay. And what is the outcome of all of these activities? What do you want students to arrive at when they have read and do this matching?
Well, I need to have
the lesson. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I need to have a more articulate, communicative purpose. But I think I'm wanting them to get the vocabulary input. I'm wanting them to get the experience with profiles of different initiatives. And then I think sharing their personal interests with each other is communicative purpose for 19-year-olds any day. But then additionally, after reading the profiles, maybe we would have, as a class, determine which sustainable development goals are most relevant to our class at this time this year.
Fantastic. That's your communicative objective. That's it, So after all this reading, we're going to say which is the 3 ones that the class think it is the most urgent or the most relevant, or what is that going to be, better for our communities or for Chicago, or so that is your communicative objective, So you have to make it clear, because you have to students to say, they need to see that, they need to know this outcome at the beginning of the lesson, right? Today we're going to select the 3 most important initiatives, that are going to work for, or that would be best for our community, or whatever it is that So this is, and that, knowing that, Sharon, you are going to then develop your lesson plan much easily, because you want to arrive to that goal, right? So fantastic. I love it. This is very nice. Okay, very good. All right, so it's about 11. And I wish I could hear all of your ideas. If you want to share them with me, please go ahead, send me an email, and I would love to see, to listen. And if you want to have feedback, I would happily give you feedback in your pedagogic task and your target task. I think you have very good ideas and a good start already. Okay, so before we finish, yesterday it occurred to me that maybe I wanna share with you what remember my target task, which was to Erin knew it very well, which was to design an object and to describe it, and with the purpose of, the class select which is the best object, right? The most innovative one. So do you want to see what one of my students did? So I'm gonna, it's just in a way of showing up, my work and my students' work, but also as a way of inspiration.
It's 11 o'clock.
For you to see that it can actually be done, right? And it's done pretty well. And then I'm gonna give you some final tips on how you can incorporate or implement, your target task, your task-based unit, right, or a lesson. So let's see what, this is a video of my student, this student, it was last semester in the spring, and this student was not the best one, it was not the worst one, it was like the average. So the words that are in enhanced in red or in black here in the translation that I wrote are the words, the expressions that I hope, through the pedagogic task students to learn, so they could use them, as they were presenting their object, right? And you can see, I can see, when I did the transcript of his presentation, that he actually used them and used them well, right? So I could see some learning there. And he used his own resources as well. So you wanna see? Let's see. Can you hear?
Sirve para Román. Va bien para los docentes. Siempre tienen los labios todo el tiempo. Ladero conecta sus teléfonos con Bluetooth y Wi-Fi y va a funcionar con pila y con energía solar. Y cuando camina demasiado lejos de los lados, el teléfono te alerta y sí, el material es metal en el interior, pero en el exterior es plástico.
Entonces, cuando caminas lejos de las llaves, el llavero detecta y te dice, estás caminando muy lejos de las llaves.
Sí.
¡Wow! ¡Qué innovador! Ok. ¿Algo más?
Eso es.
Ok, es todo. Excelente. El llavero es para... Okay, so this is what, in my opinion, what a communicative class, looks like. That is exactly what I wanted my student to do, and he did it, right? He used his own resources, and he used resources that he found useful for his creation. He created these, he said exactly what was done, what was to be said, right? He did a very good presentation. Maybe he lacked a little bit of fluency, or maybe what he wasn't very clear, but he accomplished the task. At least, in my opinion, he accomplished that. He did what, to the point, right, that his object was selected as third place, third place. It was other ones that the first place, the second place, his was third. So to me, I think this serves as an inspiration to see, that students can actually, use a task as a vehicle for language use to accomplish a goal. Okay, so I want to finish just very quickly with these tips for you to think about when you create your task-based lesson. So the first thing, that has worked for me is make sure your students know what the target task at the end of the module is about, right? You need to tell them in 2 weeks or in 1 week or in 3 days, we're going to do this. How you were going to implement it, where you're going to work in pairs, you are going to first do this, and then you're going to do this, right? And that if they are going to do something outside of the classroom, you have to say, right? And how you are going to evaluate them. You put the rubric of the evaluation. Erin was asking about the evaluation. Unfortunately, I couldn't talk about evaluations, but students need to know how you are going to be evaluated in this target task from the beginning, right? I do that via email. I don't try not to use English in my class. If I have to explain things that are complicated, I use email. You use whatever works for you that students are going to read, right? So they have to know in advance, so it will help you save you time and headaches. Then show enthusiasm about target task, right? Address it as a value. Address its value, right, as a vehicle for language use, right? Or use whatever argument you think it works for your students, and make it an enthusiastic, introduction of the target task. You need to be, enthusiastic and happy about this task, this target task, and so students can see, your enthusiasm, and they get enthusiastic too. Tell students that in the next number of class lessons, you will be doing these, other tasks, these pedagogic tasks and other ones, because it's going to be a preparation for the target task. They need to see the relevance of what they are doing today, as for example, in your classes, why are we talking about environmental issues? Why are we talking about holidays? What are we talking about? They need to know why. It's not just for practice language. It is because you have to do a target task in Friday, remember? So that is going to help you accomplish this. For each lesson plan, right? Tell students the goal of the pedagogic task, what I was telling to Shannon, you need to be clear what is the goal and you need to tell them. And motivate students to pay attention and to do their best doing the pedagogic task. Create interest. It is our job, create interest, pique their curiosity. Have you ever had a gadget in the kitchen that never works? I have one, I can show you mine. Have you? I think everyone has. Nobody has one? Wow, interesting, you don't have a gadget. So pique their interest in, show interest in what they say and make them accountable. This is the best advice that I can give you so your task works. And finally, when evaluating the target task, I would say at least at the beginning levels, maybe not at the advanced levels, but at the beginning levels, give priority to task completion. Task completion should be, the goal for sure. But at the beginning levels, there will be a lot of inaccuracy. But if the task is completed, well, pay attention to that, give reward task completion. This is at the end of the day what we want, that the students really, bake the cake, that the students find the bathroom, whatever it is that they need to do, they accomplish it, right? And recognize the students using their own linguistic resources, like my student did, when he was presenting their lesson. Okay, so I'm done, right? Thank you very much for your attention. It has been a pleasure to meet you all, to talk with you. I will see the chat again, and see if, if you have questions that I cannot address right now. I can address it later. And I think we have, I don't know how much time we have, maybe 3 or 4 minutes for questions if you have them. So thank you very much.